Just about ready to kick off the next session. I'd like to welcome you all here today. It was sort of, hopefully you found that introduction to the levy and the research program that FGR runs interesting. And I'm really pleased to be here 6 years after we started the Growing Confidence in Forestry's Research Future. It gives me a lot of confidence that the levy is going to be around for another 6 years, and so myself and my colleagues can continue to support the forest growing industry here in New Zealand. So my name is Peter Clinton. My role here today is as the program leader for the GCFF program. I'm going to provide a quick introduction. In terms of the format of today's presentations, it's a little bit different rather than the sort of classic science sort of presentation where somebody gets up and sort of gives an introduction, provides some methods and results and conclusions. We've moved away from that, so we've gone to sort of more of a storytelling around what the GCFF program has achieved over the last 6 years. So hopefully that will be an interesting and lively presentation during the day. But as you can see by your handouts, we're going to cover a lot of information. So please don't hesitate to contact the researchers after today or during lunchtime and during the evening today. Maybe sit next to your favourite scientist over dinner, and then you've got all day tomorrow as well to interact with the various people here. So I'll see if I can get the technology to run. And I'll also, by the way, when we've finished the presentations, we're going to have a little sort of panel discussion. Maxime sort of introduced the Poll Everywhere app, so hopefully everybody's diligently loaded it up during morning tea. And some of you young guys have probably got the technology sussed and got 10 questions lined up already, so hopefully that will make for a really interesting and lively discussion as well. So 6 years ago when we kicked off the Growing Confidence program, we had a conference in Rotorua, I think actually in 2014. And I suppose sort of I gave an introductory slide fairly similar to this, but it was all around what the aims of the program were. And at that time, it was all around maximising the benefits from existing forests, enhancing future forests in terms of making them more productive and profitable, and ensuring that any future intensification was sustainable. And one of the key sort of underpinning technologies was the use of a range of sensors. And those of you who were at the remote sensing phenotyping cluster workshop yesterday would have heard about some of the latest sensors. But I suppose in terms of the program, we've used quite a broad range of environmental sensors, other sensors as well. So the program has been very technology driven. So we'll hear a bit more about those during the rest of the day. So in terms of one of the things I was just keen to mention, and Russell and the Levy Trust will be interested to hear this, but in terms of what has this 6-year program had in terms of industry impact, and we'll hear a little bit more about these during the day, but I think some of the things that I've noticed is that we've had companies talking about productivity enhancement strategies, and so some people have set targets in terms of their mean annual increments that they want to achieve within certain timeframes. We've seen the uptake of new wood quality assessment tools. What is really exciting is that more recent times we've had large-scale operational fertiliser trials with a range of different approaches to sort of the classic urea out of the bag approach installed, and we'll hear a little bit more about that today. We've heard mention of the routine use of remote sensing technologies by a number of companies, and also we've seen in more recent times the adoption of the phenotyping platform that we'll hear about in detail as well. We've also had a lot of interest in a novel biostimulant, and we'll hear a bit more about that later on today. So what I wanted to just sort of briefly go through is you're going to hear a lot of different stories about the research that we've been doing at different scales within the forest. And so just as an example here, looking at the soil, at the trees growing, we're going to hear a bit more around how we can enhance microbial processes in the soil, some of the about the biological indicators of soil quality. We've now got the ability to study microbial gene function in soils, and we've developed a nutrient supply model called NuBARM, which some people are now using to predict fertiliser requirements. At the tree scale, we'll hear about individual phenotyping, the ability that we've now got through genomic tools to sort of examine parentage of trees of interest. We'll hear a bit about balanced nutrition and what that may mean for fertiliser use in the future. We'll hear a little bit around root system development of a range of different species, and also a little bit of work around novel fertilisers. At the cambial level, we've now got new methods to study wood formation, and we've got, as a result of that, we've got new understanding around the formation of wood within radiata pine, and we're developing models to look at how stems grow and the consequences of those growth processes for wood properties. At the nursery level, we've been investigating the reduced use of herbicides, fungicides and fertilisers, and the implications of that for seedling quality as they leave the nursery gate, and that work's been going on for a number of years. At the stand level, we'll hear a bit today around the interaction of genotype, environment and silviculture on wood properties. We'll hear about application of sensor networks within the forest to find out about how trees are growing in response to environmental signals. We'll hear a little bit around root system models as well, so how do root systems develop and bind soil together, and that allows us to make all sorts of decisions around spacing of trees when we plant them. And we'll hear about new approaches and possibilities to close the gap of vulnerability. We'll hear a little bit about site modifications, how we can actually modify the site so that it appears quite different to the trees. And then we will hear a little bit around sort of novel foliar fertiliser applications and the potential for that to change the way we approach fertilising our forests. And again, at the catchment scale, we'll hear a bit around area-based phenotyping. We'll hear a bit around ecosystem services, quantification, evaluation, and also around licence to operate issues around fertiliser use. So quite important challenges there if we're going to fertilise a forest. How can we do that in ways that don't compromise water quality? And finally, we'll hear sort of about issues and research at the national scale. So we'll hear a little bit around what we call the productivity gap. We'll hear a bit around Mike Watt's work around the final crop stocking model. We'll hear about the sustainability of harvesting, and so the results of long-term trials that were established over 30 years ago. We've now seen those trials through to the end of their rotation, and so we have got some quite unique data sets there in relation to changes in soil properties, uptake in nutrient allocation within biomass. So that's of great relevance to this question of how sustainable is forestry in New Zealand. And we're also here around some of the important drivers of productivity. So in terms of soil quality, what is it that we need to measure to know if our sites are changing and their productive potential is going to change over time? And we'll hear in amongst the mix something around segregation models, new models there to segregate our logs in the forest. So quite a substantial list of activities that have been undertaken in the last 6 years, and I suppose Russell made some comments there around communication, but just some numbers. But a key thing for the program has been this communication of our results in a number of different ways, participation in farm forestry conferences, these sorts of industry conferences, the cluster groups. So communication has been a big part of it. And so today, I'm really hoping that you all walk out the door nodding your heads with the fact that you know something new. So finally, big learnings for me personally has sort of been around the value of long-term research and the benefits for, Russell made the point that forestry, we're a long time in the ground, long time between drinks in terms of changing what we do on the sites. And so, if we set off down a particular pathway with a particular regime and silvicultural practice, it actually takes us a very long time to to find out what the impact of that practice has been on the value of the crops that we're actually producing. So we've been very lucky within the Growing Confidence program to benefit from the legacies of foresighted researchers who set these long-term trials up back in the 80s and 90s. And one of the things that I'd like to recognise for this Growing Confidence program is the support that we've had from the industry reps on the technical steering committees to support further long-term investment. So some of you all young guys here will, when you're going a bit grey in 20 or 30 years' time, you'll be able to look back and say, I can remember when those trials were established, and here we are, 30 years on, actually harvesting these trees and getting those sort of final results. So, I think it's really important that we pass on the mantle there of long-term research and keep supporting it. The other one is of investment and investing in technology and capability. So I haven't got the numbers, but during the day you'll hear a lot from some of the more recent recruits that Sign have been able to make with the support of industry supporting research programs over the last 5 or 6 years. And you'll also see some of the results that have been generated by the technology that has been invested in too. And it's really good to see that sort of combination of young minds and technology coming together to produce valuable research results. The other thing that for me has been a big learning is the benefits of a systems approach. I'm not a systems scientist, but everything's connected, and so we need to understand when we pull certain levers what's going to sort of pop out the other side. And again, I think in terms of some of those sort of complicated long-term questions that we face in forestry, the only way we can sort of tackle those is really through a systems approach. And the other thing I always like saying at these meetings from a very personal bias is that there is more than one genome in the forest. And I think Russell sort of alerted to this in terms of our changing environments. And so we do need to look broader than just the tree. We need to understand all the other genomes that are interacting with those trees over the life of the tree. I think that going forward, those interactions are going to be really important. So just about to finish, but I presented a slide like this in 2017 down at our meeting in Dunedin, and at that time it was sort of a prophecy around where were we going with the Growing Confidence program, where we knew at that time that we had to rebid it. And I suppose I've sort of started to refer to the Growing Confidence program as a hub. And so a lot of things have sort of spun out of the Growing Confidence program. We've involved in a program with Lincoln on endophytes, which is sort of built on some of the work that has gone on in the Growing Confidence program. We now have a new Endeavour Fund program called Forest Flows, and that's built on chunks of the GCFF program. There's a thing down the bottom, Next Generation Forest Management. That's sort of part of the future view around how we need to change what we're doing in the forest. We've been doing the same thing for the last 50 or 60 years, so maybe it's time to look into the future and see how we can do things differently, so that's something coming. We've got this Resilient Forests program idea. That sort of really was the idea, was to pull in the best of the Growing Confidence and the Healthy Trees, Healthy Future programs and start to focus on some of these issues that are coming along in sort of our uncertain future. So I think we can sort of look back and say, yep, a lot of things came out of the GCFF program, different ways of doing things, different ways of thinking. So we'll just have to wait and see where we end up in 2 or 3 years' time from now. So just some important acknowledgements, I suppose. Just a reminder that the Growing Confidence program is funded by the Endeavour Fund. More importantly, and most importantly, is the Forest Growers Levy Trust. The support there has helped us immensely through forest owners and farm forestry. Russell mentioned the technical steering committees, and I think over the last 6 years we've had something like 24 odd meetings, and so there is a really core dedicated group of people who have turned up every 3 months to these meetings and sort of help direct the program. So any volunteers, I'm sure Russell will be keen to hear from you going forward. I'd like to really acknowledge Russell for all his support and efforts, and 6 years has been a long time, Russell, but it's been really good, so thank you very much. And also the cast of many scientists who you will hear from today, the technicians, the postgraduate students, the industry reps, our international collaborators, have all made for a very successful program. So thank you very much. So I'm not going to take any questions, but I'm going to hand over to Amanda to moderate the next session. So Amanda.